now that are, one is a 3-year-old house that's going to cost, I don't know, 150,000 to repair or so. There's an 8-year-old house that there's pictures in here that's probably hitting closer to $200,000 to repair. It's just catastrophic, and the only way these people can afford this stuff is attorneys, and these are not the exceptions. These are the rules. I mean, I can take you to house after house after house after a few years and show you where the water's getting in there and it's starting to deteriorate the house. Some of these houses go a year before it's a problem, and some of them go 30 years. It just, you can't predict how or when it's going to fail. So it's a big thing. It's easily corrected. It only costs about $200 to $300 more to do these homes right. So it's not like it's a big thing. But it is $200 to $300. A big national builder, his own expert. They've got, from what I hear, 300 to 400 lawsuits coming their way over stucco, and their own expert told them, hey, for $200 to $300, I can show you how to do this right. And the CEO of the company said, what? I build 7,000 houses a year. Just not going to do it. They're going to roll their dice and see what the courts say. And to me, that's a horrible aspect for the poor consumer. So with that said, I'm going to kind of jump into this and get started, because there is a lot of information here to cover in 2 hours. So we're going to hit it pretty quickly. I am available if anybody has any questions later on. I'm easy to get in touch with and what have you. A big part of the problem is the code doesn't go into enough detail. When you get into under section 703.7 of the code, and some of these numbers may have changed or constantly change in the code book, but they should be pretty accurate still. It requires the ASTM C 926 and ASTM 1063 standards to be followed. That's whole other chapters in itself. That's what goes into all the detail about the plaster, and the average person doesn't have those documents. They're not very expensive, but they just don't have them. But that's where everything lies, is within those ASTM standards. And it's important that you have that. Without it, there's no way you can possibly tell if stucco's being done right. And stucco is really just not that difficult. We just need smarter workforces, and we don't have that right now. We got to educate these people. And that's where it comes back on you building officials to find these things, because it is catastrophic in the damage that it's causing. There's 4 main types of stucco that you're going to see around, and that's your hard coat stucco. It's generally a 2 to 3 coat stucco, depending on what the substrate is behind it. You can occasionally find what's called a Western 1 coat. It is a manufactured product. It doesn't really meet the any type of code or standards as a 1 coat, but there is a deal out there using it. I found that being used in the New Braunfels area north of San Antonio. Eaves in Central Texas area is not used that much on residential, more on commercial. Other areas it was used quite a bit. And then there's a modified stucco, which, I mean, it could just run the gamut. It might have a styrofoam board back behind it, like what you would see with eaves, but then they put a hard coat stucco over it. They may put a 1 coat or 2 coat stucco application, and then a polymer top coat, such as Drive It or what have you, over the top of that. The manufactured, what I like to call just the lick and stick stone veneer that goes straight over the stucco. And then there's a new one coming up that I just really hate. Several builders are using it. I just call it a faux stucco. It's made, it's an LP product. It goes over their panel, which originally started as their smart panel, a smart siding, and now it's that strand board or whatever they call it, they're putting it over it. It's taped at the seams, and then they put a polymer coat over the top of it, and it's just got all kinds of problems. That product can't touch the masonry veneer at the wainscot, which it does. It can't touch the slab and so forth, and we're not going to go into that, but there's just all kinds of issues with the install with that as well.
Don't you just
and
love
that's
it,
man.
when you see a manufacturer come out with a new product? That I remember when I first saw T-ply hit the market and thought, well, this is not a good product. I mean, what are you going to do?
Right. Oh, no, it's an issue. Now, here's one of the things about that product, and we'll hit it real quick, is they keep having to buy some of their trim accessories from James Hardie. Their trim doesn't hold up. So they've had all kinds of issues with that. So when you see that, it's going to have a piece of fiber cement trim around it a lot of times, where they're having to buy that product because the other trim doesn't hold up. and that really, takes us to the end of the presentation. I mean, it's all bad, and it's all bad because of the way we install it. There's absolutely nothing the matter with stucco when it's installed properly. It is a great product. That's a 50 to 100-year product. Does require maintenance, but so does everything else in the world. But it is something that does hold up very well when installed properly. It's all about the flashings, the penetrations, and so forth. Leaks around the windows are a big issue, and so that's a big part of what we have with them is the installation aspects of it. Where when we're talking about brick or stone, that 1-inch space behind there, it just means everything in the world to try to help prevent that moisture from getting into your moisture barrier. When we have this stucco directly up against her, and I've seen it with James Hardy too, and I'm a fan of James Hardy, but I had a court case here where the Hardy siding wasn't put on properly, and an 8-month-old house was $84,000 in damage. The furniture was growing mushrooms out of the top of the bedroom dresser. The builder's excuse was my client brought the mold into his house, and they went and bought new furniture, and the new furniture started growing mushrooms out of the bottom of the drawer. The humidity was that high in the house from the leak in James Hardy. So if you don't put a product on, you're going to have moisture problems. You're going to have problems no matter what.
Hey, that's just a bonus. This brand new home comes with an interior mushroom garden.
Yes. Yeah, no doubt about it. It had a severe fungal growth. It was crazy. What to look for? So obviously, no matter what we got to have a drainage system. Got to have some type of drainage plan with anything we install in a house. You take that James Hardy siding and you caulk the bottom of it shut, like a lot of these pest control companies are doing, and you're forcing water up underneath that toe plate. The flashing at the doors and windows, obviously, real big one. Means to expand and contract. I don't worry about the cracks as much. A lot of people panic about cracks and they go, oh, it's cracking. Well, yeah, it's going to crack. It's, we can help alleviate some of that cracking, and obviously we want to do that, but it is concrete. It is going to crack some. Bond breaks into similar materials, same type of thing. And then the types of sealants, the one-shot caulk like they used to use, and a little more background. I also used to build custom homes, so I'm very familiar with one shot and some of the other products that are out there. I tell people if it says 30-year caulk, it's good for 30 days. If it says 50-year caulk, it's good for 50 days. It just does not hold up. We need good sealants. Caulk is just a nasty word that should not be used, and we use it, but it shouldn't be. Elastomeric paints. Every builder around says, well, we paint our house elastomeric paints. So they're basically putting a condom over their house. It does not breathe. It typically will rot that out prematurely. I might have some pictures of a house that was done with partial elastomeric, and I'll have to look and see if it's in here. It traps moisture. I go to these houses a few years old. There's a big water balloon sticking out of the wall. I can pop it with a knife. The water comes pouring out of the wall. It traps it. It's not going to make a perfect seal at doors or windows, and it traps the moisture in there. Elastomeric paints just cannot be used in lieu of proper flashing details. And then in general, it's got some issues with the perm rating. And down here, I just don't feel it has enough permeability. I'd rather use a name brand product, and I'm not, this is not an endorsement for Drive It by any means, or several others, but a name brand product that has a polymer top coat that has a much better perm rating is going to allow that house to breathe. Obviously, we've sized our ACs properly to help take care of some of the vapor.
Hold on. What'd you just say?
Whoa. I know, but
I didn't hear you correctly, because I know you didn't just say we've sized our ACs properly.
No. We should be sizing our ACs.
Oh, okay.
A good AC guy will have, because we are going to have to accommodate for water vapor in our houses down here. Other areas, elastomeric is probably going to be all right, but in this region of the state, we need to breathe. Everything is about breathing down here. And we have to be able to allow our houses to breathe. And then ideally, our AC should be sized and designed properly for the region it's put in to help accommodate for it. And I know it's not. I know Jason and I talk about this all the time, about all the returns are undersized and improperly ducted, and rooms with no means of return, whether it's a jumper duct, some type of bypass or return. And I just did one yesterday, 4 supply vents into a master bedroom and no return on a 2-story, no way to get it in there. So you're gonna have to cut a hole through the wall and put a pass-through grill. You can't have 4 supplies into a room like this and no return. You're gonna have to cut 12, 13 inches off the bottom of the door to make this work. So here's the standards. Good little cheat sheet. I actually print this out because I can't always remember all this stuff, although I'm pretty good at remembering all these codes every now and then. I need a little bit of help. So it kind of gets into a little bit with the IRC. We start with the flashings, exterior plaster. We get into lath, a little more into plaster, your weep screed, which is defined by a 3.5-inch flashing detail. A casing bead is not a weep screed. The holes, as you're going to see, are not designed to let water out. I'll show you how a weep screed is to work and how it works. Obviously, our WRBs got to have good weather-resistant barriers. We keep changing the name, moisture barrier, then so forth. And now the newest term they like to use is vapor retarder. So your WRB's got to be in there.
What about that cheap perforated builder wrap? That's good stuff, right?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Tyvek.
Amen.
You know, when you look at these house wraps, I tell people everything you ever heard about house wraps being horrible is true, with the exception of Tyvek. The engineering that goes into it is different. Some of this other stuff that's off-labeled, you know, the builder has it labeled in their name, is no more than a woven feed sack. I mean, there's holes in it everywhere. It's not doing anything to stop the water at all, much less vapor. It's just not doing anything. Then we get into the applications, the curing. The curing is another major problem, as you're going to see coming up. None of the stucco is being cured right. That's adding a lot of cracking to it and so forth. And then in the code under there is our ASTM standards, which is critical. And that's really what you need to look at. If you building officials don't have those standards, you need to get them. They're about $70, $80 a chapter. You will no sooner buy them and they'll send you an email 2 months later and tell you they changed them and got a new one. I don't buy them all the time. It's usually very, very subtle wording in there that gets changes, but every few years, obviously, they become like the code, and there's enough changes where you have to buy new chapters. I split them with some guys. For an extra $10, you get 3 copies. So there's 3 of us together, and so we split them up like that, and it's pretty cheap to buy them. Flashing. So this one is a little bit quite interesting. So when you start looking at the flashing, you start looking at the ASTM standards. We can't confuse window flashing for stucco flashing. Those are 2 separate codes. So all the time you're going to see the lick and stick flashing details up there, and that does meet the ASTM standards. That does not meet the code requirements for stucco. Stucco still requires its own flashing details you're going to see. But under the 703.4.2, and they keep bouncing that around. It was 703.8, it was 703.5. Right now I think it's still at 703.4.2. Intersections of chimneys or other masonry constructions with frame or stucco walls with projecting lips on both sides under the stucco copings. So when you start looking at all these stucco houses with decorative bands, they are requiring flashing details in the code. So it's not just the ASTM standards, it's also in the code when you start getting these decorative bands. And as you're going to see, at least in the South Central Texas region, you're going to see here in a little bit, almost all the decorative bands are being done wrong. And that's why a lot of other stucco experts feel decorative bands are a horrible idea. I think decorative bands are fine when they're done right, but I would agree that decorative bands are a horrible idea with the way that we tend to build them in this region of the state. Exterior plaster, the installation of plaster 703.7, and here it is, plain as day. It must also comply with ASTM standards. There used to be another ASTM standard in there. I think it was C923. I don't remember. They took that out of the code. That had to do with the zinc or galvanized coatings, which you would never know. So that was irrelevant anyways. You'd have to send that stuff to a lab to have it tested, down the road as to whether they complied with those standards properly, and nobody's doing that. Chicken wire generally won't comply, but you can use chicken wire if it's the right size and the right gauge. It can be used. Here's your standards for the lath. You're going to see what happens when they use improper chicken wire coming up. Exactly how it has to be attached, the attachment. I don't get as concerned. It's kind of like anything else. If there's some areas that are randomly improperly attached, it's not going to hurt anything. Whole large sections, obviously it will. It causes it to buckle under its own weight in some instances, causing a lot of cracking and damage that should not be occurring, and that's because the lath is pulling loose. And so there's your standards under 703.7.1. It gives you standards: no less than 3 coats over metal lath or wire, shall be not less than 2 coats when applied over masonry, concrete, pressure preservative treated wood, or decay resistant wood, or gypsum. You still will see some gypsum. It's still used. I'm not a big fan of gypsum, but it does, as long as it meets those ASTM standards with a waxy coating on there, it does suffice to be used, and it does also equal one of your WRBs. It can be used. The reason I don't like it is those staples do not have a good pull out. They can pull back out much easier than they can going through OSB or plywood or anything like that. Where it obviously hits the studs, not a big issue. If it's put on over a plywood substrate and these long enough staples, then it's kind of irrelevant. I still prefer Tyvek or even Zip. Zip is a big one, and you're going to see a lot of Zip stuff coming up. The weave screeds, this is a big one. So weave screed has been in there, and you can go back all the way back to CABO and Southern Building Code. It didn't go into this kind of detail, but like I tell people, weave screed has been around in the code since Christ was in diapers. It is literally that old. The ASTM standards, I've been doing this 30 years. It's been in there. Back then we used CABO in the Southern Building Code. It just referenced a screed. Okay. It didn't go into the 3.5-inch flashing detail like it does now. But when you got to the ASTM standards, it still defined the screed as what we have now. So the idea of the weave screed has not changed much over the last 30 years and possibly even over the last 40 years, even though you could not even buy it in the San Antonio market here until about, I don't know, started becoming around where you could even buy it 5-6 years ago. Prior to that, you had to special order it and wait for it to come in. They didn't even stock it at the supply houses here.
Oh, they still don't at Home Depot. Go back to that last slide real quick, Jeff. And I can guarantee you one thing we never see that we just if you use your back arrow, it'll go. There we go. Hey, what about this? The wheat screed shall be placed not less than 4 inches above the earth. We are normally okay at that. But think about stucco on back porches. I've seen it on porches where it's just going to get hammered with water. What does the stucco do at a porch? It goes all the way down to the concrete.
Yep. And we're going to cover that.
Drain? How's that going to drain?
Well, same thing happens with the wood framing behind our brick or stone columns. It's the same thing. We've got that wood on there, and they get older. That pressure treated wood gets soft and starts to fail. Dean at M-Law, I've got a couple of court cases where he's on the other side as an expert, and he's got a pretty good solution to retrofit and fix that. Now, ideally, some of the builders I'm working with, we're going to cover that. I make them come back and re-pour a pedestal on the porch. So the guys can't get the pedestals done right. So they come back, they drill in, they dowel it, and they pour a concrete pedestal. I'm not too worried about 2 inches down here, but I want an inch. We don't get enough ice damming at 2 inches is a big issue. When you get up around Dallas and northward, you got to have the 2 inches. You're going to ice dam it, and it's going to pop that stucco loose and break it all along the bottom. Now, we just had an ice damming issue here, and you're going to find some cracked stucco because of the big storms that we had here. That's not the norm, but typically 1 inch. And James Hardy tells you the same thing. Yeah, we require 2 inches, but if you get me 1 inch in this region, I'm all right with it. It's not going to ice dam or anything. But no, you're right, and we're going to cover that here in just a little bit. You're going to see some photos, but it needs a pedestal to get that up. Here's one of the other big issues, too, that you see is these outdoor kitchens. Some of the builders have gotten smart and started using some CMU block to build these and stucco them, but the ones that are doing wood, they're just putting them straight down on the porch. The stucco comes down to it, and within a few years, these outdoor kitchens are all completely rotted out because it leaks up around the granite countertop. It runs down the backside of the stucco, gets the OSB wet, pops it all loose, gets down the toe plate, and it just completely rotted out a $30,000 outdoor kitchen. The water resistant barriers, again, stucco is one of these ones that does need 2 layers of moisture barrier. I personally feel that the engineer that submitted the way the moisture barrier has to be done at the sill flashings or pan flashings is completely wrong. The builders I work with, when I write repair protocols, I do some things. I've with Stephen Cook Engineering and stuff on some stucco projects and what have you. I actually draw it a little bit differently. I don't let my sill flashings terminate between the layers. I want to keep as much water on that second layer of moisture barrier as humanly possible. It just prevents us from having issues down the road. You know, it's no different than a tile roof. If you can keep 99% of the water on top of that tile rather than getting underneath it, you're going to have a much better roof structure. Some of the time I was doing a mediation, and one of the tile manufacturers testified in mediation that their barrel tile was all right to have as much as 30% of the water underneath the barrel tile. I almost died. I went, oh my God. Very difficult. If we let 30% of our water get between our moisture barriers, we're gonna have problems. We need to make sure that we keep as much water up on those moisture barriers that gets behind the plaster as humanly possible. The application, each coat shall be kept in a moist condition for at least 48 hours. I know every one of you guys that are out there doing inspections drive by and see these guys out there with garden hose misting their stucco for 48 hours between the coats. You know, that's part of what's causing a lot of the cracking that you see. And then they're just coming back and reapplying the next coat the next day, which you're not allowed to do, and they do it anyways.
Well, how do you do that in August? I mean,
yeah, no, you got to have a guy out there with a hose a few times a day, hosing it down. No, no doubt about it. And it's not being done. Yeah. The finish coat for 2 coat cement plaster shall not be applied sooner than 7 days after the application. They will put up an application today, and they'll be out there putting the next application tomorrow. A lot of times, and they're just roll with it, and it's not allowing enough curing times, causing a lot of cracking.
Yeah, I see 48. I see at least 2 days, but it says 7, folks. It says 7.
Yeah. Yeah, you will occasionally, and that's only because they got paid, and so they didn't show up the next day. It depends on what day it is. If it's a Monday, they'll be back on Tuesday doing it. The best thing is to have it applied at least on a Friday. You know, here is your ASTM C 1060, ASTM C 926 standards, and here's what's really important here. Stucco is the only material that requires a specifier and a contract. So a specifier must design the stucco with drawings and details. Then a contract must be put together between the stucco applicator and the builder. And I use that in court all the time. When they always want to argue, I just tell the attorney, said, hey, ask them for their stucco contract. And the other side always responds, what stucco contract? What are you talking about? What do you mean? You got to have a stucco contract. You're applying this product with no contract. So there it is, and it's listed in more than one area, A2.1.2. And so it specifically tells you for control joints. I flip-flop the word control joints with expansion joints and what have you. They both do the same thing. One works better than the other, obviously. A 2-piece expansion joint works much better, but both of them are designed to allow for expansion and contraction. So right there under the dot 2, you can see flashing shall be specified at openings, perimeters, and terminations to prevent water from getting behind the plaster. You can't deal with it once it's in the plaster with the flashings. You have to have flashings at each one of those areas to prevent it from going behind the plaster. That's every door, every window, every gable vent, all your wainscoting between dissimilar materials. It all requires a flashing detail. Okay,
then while we're here, so is it possible to put your standard flanged window on a wall on new construction and have stucco come down and meet the top of that window without flashing?
No, impossible.
And you see it all the time.
Right. Almost 100%. Some of the builders I'm working with have gotten a lot better. You're starting to see it a little bit more.
So inspectors, all of you inspectors on the webinar this morning, flashing is cheap. Flashing is not expensive. If your builders in your jurisdiction are bringing the stucco down to the top of the window and terminating it at the window with no flashing, make them stop.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yep. Yep. It must have that flashing. We got to deal with it. We got to keep that water out of there. The other one so another section, as you can see, there's more than one area of contract. Okay. So here's another section under the ASTM for contracts. And this one's going to deal with the additional standards for control and expansion joints. Now, the ASTM standards do not require expansion joints or control joints at every single penetration. But you're going to find coming up in here, or I may not be in here, but there is there's an additional data from that, and basically that's what it says. That the additional data says that every penetration must have an expansion or control joint. Okay, so it must have it. So you see all these houses. And the builder or even the architect goes, oh, well, it doesn't look good with those expansion joints there. And I go, yeah, well, neither does that big damn diagonal crack with water oozing out of it with green algae. It does require expansion or control joints at every single penetration through that stucco. Standards for the lath inferring to receive interior and exterior Portland cement. Separation shall be provided where plaster abuts to similar construction materials. So again, you cannot butter that vinyl window with stucco, which they all do. It is required to have a bond break with at least a 1/4 inch gap so that it can be sealed. Okay, it is a requirement to have that. Especially with these vinyl windows, as that concrete expands and contracts, it puts a lot of pressure on those vinyl windows, which are never installed properly either, cause a lot of distortion in windows that don't open and close, and a lot of egress issues. These houses get a few years old, materials expand and contract, and then we end up with windows that don't work and have egress issues on a regular basis once they get a few years old. I plagiarize these. I love these. This is a company that does called Synergy, and they've got great drawing details. This one shows you with a drain mat in there, rain screen, which Tyvek is got a good product. There's several really good ones out there. I like this company's product as well, their rain screen. But the Synergy, great place to go and look at some of these details and what have you. There is talk that there's a big push to make rain screen a requirement on stucco. On one hand, I'm all for it. On the other hand, I'm thinking, well, what are we going to do by adding one more layer to this? If we can't get the layers right yet that we already have, adding another layer is going to make it worse. I worked on the project with the Stinson Airport Control Tower here in San Antonio. I was the inspector for the engineering firms and as well as TxDOT and the FAA. And it had a stucco wainscoting around that control tower here in San Antonio. And it with that, it had a rain screen built into it. It was a great drainage mat. I really liked the product that was spec'd on there. And we could not find anyone in the San Antonio market that could put it on. We had to go to Houston and bring in a commercial stucco contractor, pay him 3 times as much in order to do that little bitty amount of stucco around that control tower, because no one in the San Antonio market could put it on. This here is showing your horizontal expansion joints or control joints, how they're going to work, how you got to have them between the first floor and second floor so that it allows for that thermal expansion. You must have expansion joints installed between floors. You're going to have difference of temperature, and you're going to have different amounts of expansion and contraction. You will often see these joints missing.
Let me ask you, so what about, does it just say between floors, or what about, I can just imagine a 20-foot plate in a great room. Isn't there like, is it 10-foot mat? Is there a?
Yeah, no, there is some details for that. And then they've also changed it. It used to be a 2-to-1 ratio between these joints. They've now changed it to 2.5-to-1 ratio. So when you see these big tall walls and they've got these expansion joints, you may have to come back, even though it doesn't have a floor there. A lot of those are going to require a horizontal expansion joint to divide that wall up even further.
Gotcha. And then, hey, while we're on this, or just, it was a slide or two ago, Kelly asked, when referring to flashing around windows, are you considering self-adhered flashings as acceptable behind stucco, or saying it's got to be metal to come outside of the window frame?
It has to come outside the window. It specifically says to prevent plaster from prevent water from draining behind the plaster.
Yeah.
The
So
peel and stick
ain't gonna cut it.
Right. Peel and stick is so there's two different flashing details that we have to look at here. We have the flashing detail for the windows, which falls under 703.4. I forget the next chapter number, but 703.4, it deals with that. Then we also, obviously have to deal with the AMA 2400 standards. Okay. And then what we're talking about here, though, is we're talking about flashing the stucco. We're not talking about flashing windows. Remember, it said windows, it said doors, it said penetrations. So anything through there has to be flashed, okay? And so we're talking about different things. The peel and stick has to be there for the windows. Yeah. The flashing, the metal flashing, or even vinyl, they make a plastic vinyl flashing. It can be used because remember, it says non-corrosive. So that vinyl flashing, on a rare occasion that you'll see, it can be used. It specifically says you cannot use aluminum. That is strictly for the stucco. We are flashing the stucco.
And where I'm thinking the peel and stick would be applicable, but the peel and stick would be applicable along the top of your metal flashing to keep water from getting back behind the metal flashing. But you want that metal flashing above the window coming through the stucco.
Right. And remember, if we're using a Tyvek product, when you look at the proper detail under AMA 2400 for detail A1, we're talking about lifting the Tyvek, putting the window in, folding the Tyvek back down, where our head flashing would be underneath that. We're using the Tyvek and the peel and stick in a shingled fashion to prevent the water from getting in there. When you see that AMA 2400 standard, the A1 detail, you look at it and you go, man, this is just genius. It's virtually impossible for a window to ever leak when it's installed properly. It's a great detail. First time I came across it, I went, oh my God, this is fascinating. I've been doing this job for 10 years and I finally come across somebody that figured out how to flash a window properly.
Hey, send that to me too. I'll send it out with a copy of the PDF. That'd be good for these guys to have.
Yeah, there's a video. I got to find it because Henry bought out FortiFlash. FortiFlash put together a video on that was awesome. And all the time builders go, well, I don't use FortiFlash. I go, just block FortiFlash. I just want you to look at this method because this is the same thing that's in the PDF for AMA 2400. They just put it into a video and it's really good.
My favorite way to start a presentation, if I have a room full of nothing but builders, is ask them, who builds their houses to code? And inevitably I'll have a few suckers raise their hand. And I've got a 90-second video of a flanged window type A Tyvek installation instructions. And about 20 seconds into that video, half of them lower their hands. And then they all lower their hands because you're not installing flanged windows over your Tyvek weather resistant barrier crap.
I got to tell you, in the San Antonio market, guys, when these houses get a few years on them, I find roughly, it's been a while since I checked and counted, but I checked and counted this before. 1 out of 3 homes has some type of leaking window once you get a few years on it. And it doesn't have to. It just doesn't. Here is a good 2-piece detail where for a true expansion joint, this is going to give you the most movement between your stucco. Here's your bond breaks. So you're seeing a window frame, you're seeing your casing bead here. We're leaving a gap between here, okay, generally a 1/4 inch. You'll see that's often referred to as an embedded caulk joint, okay? So we have our casing bead here, we have our window here, we're adding our backer rod, and then here is our sealant, okay? And it's giving us that embedded caulk joint that allows for this expansion and contraction of dissimilar materials.
And again, the idea, folks, the idea is not to keep this stuff dry. I mean, yeah, we do want to keep it dry with but the idea is we know it's going to get wet. Where's the water going to go when it does? I love this drainage mat product. I mean, if I were going to do stucco on my own house, no brainer.
Well, and they have it. I've done it twice now. James Hardie has their own product, and then there's another company that did it. That's for James Hardie, and it's you can do it behind fiber cement siding. It's pretty cool. It's a great way to do it, and it adds a little more energy efficiency because you have a little bit of air movement in there to help stop that thermal bridging between the siding and that. Here you can see your detail. Now this is an in-depth detail here. a lot more complicated than actually what the code requires, but I like it again. So you can see everything here. Here is your flashings. They put a drip leg on here. They ended this with a casing bead. I would not recommend ending this with a casing bead because it will hold moisture here. It will ice dam. It will freeze. It can end just on this flashing here, okay? And that's fine as long as we don't caulk this edge. These casing beads will hold water and they will split and so forth. One of the other problems you have is all these guys will nail it with a staple gun too low, and you're going to see that here in a little bit, and we've just ruined all our flashing details and caused it to leak. They're leaving a gap, as you can see, and putting in an embedded caulk joint underneath here. This is a very complicated window flashing detail it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I would not end it with a casing bead, but that's how they choose to do it. I wouldn't. Down here, it's not going to really hurt a whole lot, but as you start going further north, it can ice dam and split.
Well,
I would
and
never.
There's no reason with all the other details they have there. That's just point. I don't.
It is. Yeah, it's just one. It's just an extra detail that's not needed.
Yeah.
Again, now we're looking at some of the way they're doing their windows with their sill flashings up underneath the window. And then using a drainage mat. They're doing a flashing here, but then they're also doing a bib method where they're bringing us all the way down additional. Then we still got our drainage mat, we still have our moisture barrier. Again, a little bit more complicated, but they specialize with this kind of stuff. And so this is a synergy way of doing it. A little more complicated, but I guarantee it's a damn good method that won't leak when applied. This is an exact color copy of what it shows you in the ASTM standards on how to do your deco bands, any decorative bands.
We're getting this wrong, folks. Y'all watch these. Your next inspections, watch these decorative bands.
The other problem you have is when they do these decorative bands, you're going to see they're shooting holes all through our flashing. So even if we have good sill and head flashings, we are blowing holes through them. This is actually going on here and going back behind the moisture barrier and has a wrap on it. And it's when you do this, you can see how these decorative bands are going to work just fine. They're going to work great.
Does EFS have to meet ASTM or EVES? I call it EFS. Does EVES have to meet ASTM 926 as well regarding drawings and contracts? So I know Oklahoma has had a problem with the base coat. Maybe Kelly could elaborate a little bit. So they basically, the base coat's cheaper from one manufacturer, and then they got something from another manufacturer, and then it's voiding the warranty because it's not the same product, and they're having a real problem with that in Oklahoma. And it's because what kind of, I just don't understand, the supplier doesn't know better. That's what bothers me.
But this is all about saving money. It's just like the CEO for the major home builder saying, what? I build 7,000 houses a year. Basically, I am not about to spend $200 to solve this problem. If they can save the money. But you're exactly right. Some of these products are not compatible, and you have to watch that. So there is a big issue. I guarantee you there is an ASTM standard on that. I do not know what it is. We just don't use it enough down here, except on a few commercial buildings. So whenever I do run into it, I have to fully research everything. And then again, the manufacturers a lot of times are going to supersede some of the stuff, because every bit of the code says the manufacturer must comply with the standards and or the manufacturer's, not and or, but and the manufacturer specification. So like I tell people, if that manufacturer tells you to take that 50-gallon water heater and lay it on its side to install it, that's how you do it. That's how they got that product approved. So you have to look, it's very specific on some of those EFs from the manufacturer.
Yeah, and you can't, good luck. I mean, I will contend to my dying days, you can't build a doghouse to code, and you darn sure can't build a house to code, because the manufacturers are wanting to avoid litigation, and they dot every I and cross every T in their installation.
Yep. And they don't send out complete documentation. I see this all the time. When you look at the window companies and you look at these HVAC companies, you and I have talked about this, how they're doing it now, but they weren't putting the inverted loops on the Freon lines. It's not in the install manual. It comes with the condenser. You have to go to their website to get the full manufacturer's details, and it shows you right there you have to have an inverted loop 12 inches higher than the evaporator to prevent it from pulling Freon back around to the condenser and tearing it up. And it's amazing how many people don't know that because they're not sending that full install manual out, and they do that on purpose. That way, if they have a problem, they can get out from underneath it. This is just showing you how to terminate up underneath with a soffit. This is again, in my opinion, way too complicated. It does require a bond break here. Now, they did not leave a gap, and they really should have. A bond break would have required a gap along this edge to create an embedded caulk joint. I don't sweat it, especially if there's a fiber cement siding soffit underneath there. If they butt it all the way up to it, it's up underneath the eaves. I have bigger issues than that, but theoretically we are required to have a bond break and so forth here. They don't show it on this one. This is their weep screed. I don't like how their weep screeds are on. You can see these holes way down in here, which is not good. They're actually putting a membrane on here to do this and so forth. You would never have all these holes in here. I don't think this is actually drawn right. I don't see them manufacturing this with all these holes down low. This is where there's a major screw up. So when you look at those weep screeds that we typically use, a foundation weep screed, it's divided into thirds, okay? And those holes are up there at that upper third area. That is to go down in here into this toe plate. When you do that, this is going to overhang. They're showing at least 1 inch because that's the code, but most all your foundation weep screeds are going to overhang anywhere from 1.5 inches to 2 inches, okay? These guys come along with those staple guns because they're lazy, and I don't care about a staple gun. I'm fine with it. I'll accept a staple gun, but those staples better not be down here. They better be up here at your nailing holes, and it better be going into this toe plate. If it's not going into this toe plate.
Think about why Jeff's saying this, folks. Think about, so just imagine this wall and these holes here that he's pointing out. And now granted, they've got a self-adhered membrane, but just think about rotting that base plate. That toe plate will rot if those holes, that's why you want your fasteners in that top third and then seal that.
And that's going to give us our overhang so that we don't have water hitting and splashing back up underneath here. This one is a foundation weep screed, so it has a turn down to go against the foundation. But you can have just an L-shaped weep screed here at a 45-degree angle. That's still fine. That meets the criteria. It does not have to have this turn back into the foundation, okay? But it must overhang and give us that overhang. One of the big issues you see, and I don't care if it's with James Hardy or anything, they put these moisture barriers on and they stop them right here at the toe plate. Okay, where the toe plate meets the foundation. That moisture barrier has to overhang. Tyvek tells you 2 inches, but I've talked with the Tyvek rep. She goes, I can handle a 1 inch, and I can too, but that better overhang. When they put the Tyvek on and they overhang it, and it's James Hardy siding, they don't overhang it right, and they come along and they cut all the Tyvek off the bottom. And so now we have no overhang. And that moisture, even on James Hardy siding, is tracking up underneath these toe plates. And over time, it starts to rot these walls out. And it's something that's so easy to not have. It's critical that all of this comes down. And then if we're using standard Tyvek, or if we're using zip and we're using a zip tape, that tape has to come down here to the bottom. We got to cover these holes, okay? It's got to be covered, and this thing has to overhang 1 inch. But truly, when you use a traditional foundation weep screed, you're going to get 1.5 inch to 2 inch overhang past, okay, when it's installed properly. Here is a good detail, and you can see here, this is an old detail when it only required a single layer of moisture barrier. You can see their fasteners, the 2 inches from there. The foundation weep screed, you can see how it's, this one is 1 inch, and it's blurred here. I must say 1 3/8 or something that they're doing, but you're going to get that overhang. We need that overhang to prevent that water from getting up underneath there. And I don't care if it's James Hardy. All the time I look underneath these houses and the guy overhung the James Hardy siding 1/2 inch. And I'm not picking on James Hardy. I love James Hardy. I talk with a rep on a regular basis. Have it on my house. So I like a Hardy product. But again, if you only overhang it 1/2 inch, you can't stop the water from getting in there, and we have a problem. A little bit more getting into the different deck details, different things like that. You can see how we're flashing our ledger like we should. We're bringing all this down. Again, they're stopping this with a a casing bead. This should be a weep screed. No ifs, buts, and ands about it. This should be a weep screed here. Okay, so I like this company. I like it, but this product here should be a weep screed with a 3.5-inch flashing detail, because this here is a stucco termination. Doesn't matter if it terminates above a deck. It doesn't matter if it terminates above the ground, hardscapes. It requires a 3.5-inch flashing detail.
And I see this done wrong over and over again.
Oh yeah.
Apartment balconies. Apartment balconies are that little walkout. It's 12 square foot of prime real estate for water intrusion is what I call it. This ain't
well, wait till you see the photos I got here for you.
Okay.
I've got it covered. Here they're showing how they're got to be flashed here. They're showing us more of like a sealant, but it's got to have a flashing detail. I love these new diaphragm flashing boots that are out there where you tape 3 sides. They've got them for electrical outlets. I love those flashing details. I think they've come down, but they were $30 a whack, so builders weren't buying them. But they are the greatest way to flash our penetrations. And I don't care if we've got brick, if we've got hardy, if we've got wood, if we've got stucco, it's the greatest way to flash a penetration through something. Here is a plagiarized detail, engineer's detail on how to terminate this. He's using a foundation weep screed here as well, okay? And you can use that, but this is our roofline detail. This is what we're required to have. There is another way to do it, and I'm fine with it. It will work as long as we don't caulk it. I use this photo all the time in my reports because they never terminate it like this at the roof. And again, we're holding moisture. It's more apt to freeze up there and ice dam and cause a lot of cracking and damage. They normally just put a casing bead here. That casing bead measures 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch by 3/8 of an inch. The water's leaking behind that, okay, all the time. And you're putting holes through our base flashing here. If you notice, when you do this, this weep screed is going to be nailed on way up above here, above our base flashing for our roof, okay? Or even up at the top of this, so it's not going to affect it. When they do it the other way and they bring it down the roof, we're blowing holes through here down low, and we're only getting about 1 inch of flashing details before we have holes all in it. So we're, why put a piece of 4 or 6 inch flashing up the wall when you're going to put a bunch of holes in the bottom quarter of it? This is the other way to do it. As long as this comes up 3.5 inches, and as long as we don't seal this, this is going to do the same thing, okay? Now, they're not getting this behind our moisture barrier, but you'll see this a lot with metal roofs or tile roofs. This is going to work just fine as long, here's our moisture barrier, I'm sorry, our vapor retarder. So this is going to work just fine, just like this, as long as we don't caulk or seal this edge, okay? The water's going to get in here, and it can still weep out of this, okay? But it must have a 3.5 inch flashing detail. Usually they're only going up the wall just an 1.5 inches, 2 inches, okay? It's got to go up 3.5 inches in order for this to work right. But this will work just fine to finish a wall off without having that. Ideally, I'd prefer to have that 45-degree angle, but I don't. So it is what it is. Here is right out of code check, as you can see. And this is another major problem when we have a boxed window, a bench window, anything like that, or a soffit. They're wrapping the stucco all one piece. This is our outside edge. We have to have a drainage plan. Water's going to get behind here. It gets trapped, and it sits in here to these LVLs on these porches, and it rots them out. Okay? It must be a 2-piece detail here in order to create a drainage plan. Casing bead, weep screed. I'd rather have a weep screed here, but that's fine. We're going to get that water out of here. They do make a casing bead with a 3.5 inch flashing detail. I've only ever seen it once here, but someone makes it. So, I mean, theoretically, you could use a casing bead as long as it has that 3.5 inch flashing detail to catch this here, okay? This here, as you notice, is telling you to form a drip edge, which they're drawing it here. This does not, it's turned up. It's not creating a drip edge in their own drawing, but this is a great drawing. I use it all the time. You will never see beam caps, soffits, box windows, any of that will never have this. Some of the builders I'm working with saying, why do all this? It's up underneath the box window. Just use a piece of fiber cement siding here and don't caulk it. This is stucco, piece of fiber cement siding, paint it, we're done. That's a great way to do it. I love this picture here. This is from Fortifiber. So this is where there's a major breakdown. When you read the code, it tells you this sill flashing here must terminate between your two layers of moisture barrier, okay? As you can see from Fortifiber, it's telling you not to do it. I believe that that's completely wrong in the code. I'll accept it, but why do I want to force water between my two layers of moisture barrier? That makes absolutely no sense. I don't. I want to keep that water up on these moisture barriers. I don't want to force it back in the wall to that second layer that's got 10,000 holes in it. It's got the original fastening holes, then we've got all the holes from this, and then we're going to have even more holes from the stucco. I want to keep this water in here. I want to create this shingle fashion and have it terminate over the top of my paper, over my felt paper. And this is what FortiFlash is showing you. This is how I will design a repair when we tear it open. I want it up on top. The idea was to create some crinkled up paper so the stucco doesn't stick to it and prevent it from draining. When you use that FortiFlash, that plastic reinforced sill flashing material, it's a great product. That stuff's all crinkled up. That stucco's not sticking to it. And if that's really the case, think about this. If it's going to stick to that, then it's going to be the same thing here. Okay, we're doing the same thing here with this. So I don't buy that. I think that's just a major screw up with the engineer that submitted that for the code, and I think it needs to be changed. And maybe one day I'll get around to submitting a code change. I think everything needs to stay in a shingle fashion and keep the water up on the top surface as much as humanly possible.
The more you dig into the codes, the more you realize that there are mistakes throughout.
There is. I know Dean at MLaw, he designs it to go in between there because that's what the code says. As long as our weep screed is all right, it works. I disagree with that. That's the only, him and I pretty much agree on everything except that particular item on there. So if I design it, I'm keeping it on top. Again, this is a little more complicated. There doesn't have to be this complicated. We could just terminate our stucco at the flashing if we wanted to, but they went ahead and put a weep screed on here. But here's your flashing detail. Again, plagiarize this, drainage plane, and so forth. It is required to be flashed here. Nobody's doing it. What they're doing is bringing the stucco down and taking this this capstone or this brick, and they're butting it up to the stucco and then caulking it. That does not work. We're forcing water back down into here. Okay, it is not allowed to be installed in that fashion. It is required to be flashed to kick that water out and keep it up on top.
But you did say that if it was, go back to that one real quick. Oh, sorry, you did. So maybe I misheard, but you said if it's flashed, you can bring the stucco all the way down to that brick.
Oh yeah, yeah. But it's got to have the flashing. Now, what I did, and I didn't take a picture of. I should have. I've got a house here that what we did. We tore it open. It's only 2 or 3 years old, had very minimal water damage. It's been leaking since day one. We're just wrapping that up. That's been another very expensive one. What we did is we used a FortiFlash rolled out plastic reinforced material like brick flash. We put it all up in here and we terminate it underneath here with our weep holes. Okay. So you don't see any of this flashing. So the stucco comes all the way down and the brick comes up to it. You look up underneath this ledger, here's your weep holes, and we have that. Yeah, we have that flashing there. Because well, the first thing the builder says, because they always say, because they don't want to do it, oh, it's going to look like crap if we do that. And I go, oh, okay, well, let's just bring that flashing down here and terminate it underneath here, which is what they show you inside the code book for brick, anyways. And then the only thing you could say at that point was And so that's what we did, and now we don't have any nasty looking flashing. Tyvek, one of my favorites is the commercial wrap or the stucco wrap because it's got the drainage grooves in there. Again, I like zip too. I do some stuff with zip, but I do a lot more with the Tyvek because it's easier to do. People don't want to go through and rip out their OSB except where it's rotted. So we're typically going to make our repairs when we tear the windows out and redo everything with the Tyvek. Everything I specify is commercial wrap or the stucco wrap. Again, a little more of the Tyvek details of how they're to go on. This is their rain screen product that they have out. You don't see it on residential. They do use it some on commercial. You're seeing some of the engineers requiring it on commercial buildings. Okay. Again, great idea. I love the idea. I'm just not convinced that we're smart enough to use it because we can't get these other layers right yet. Competitors product. I do a lot of stuff with Zip, as you know. I like their rep. Great guy. If you ever have any questions, both these companies have great reps. I think you got them where they're going to be doing some classes for you coming up, don't you, Jason? Zip and Tyvek.
We are back and forth talking. We haven't hopefully. Actually, what I want to get them to do is meet me on site for some of this field training, but we haven't determined anything yet. But cool. It's coming. Yes, thank you for.
Yeah, they're good people. I've met with the Zip rep out on the job site. One of the issues I have with Zip is that it terminates right at the toe plate here. Okay, it stops. It doesn't overhang. So it's critical that weep screed gets put on here and flashed right. Okay. You can't have any air bubbles in it, anything like that. Otherwise, that moisture tracks down into there. Again, you know, if we have Tyvek, they just cut the Tyvek off anyways, flush with air. And you go, man, why'd you cut it off? It was made to overhang a little bit. You have to really watch out with that weep screed. Where I see an issue often is when we're getting into a lot of the board and batten, our moisture barrier is not overhanging. So anything gets behind the board and batten with James Hardy, and it can get up underneath this edge. So what I'm having the builders do is run a piece of zip tape along this edge and then bring the board and batten down, and that solves that problem. Here is where we start getting into all of our Bobos. These penetrations are not flashed. All this was put on first, and then they punched the holes through, which you see that a lot. I'm seeing that a lot with James Hardy. We put our Tyvek on, and then we put our whatever our material is going to be, whether it's Stucco or James Hardy, and then they come along and they start punching all the holes for electrical, plumbing. None of it's flashed. And they come in on the inside and they try to do it with some expanding foam, and it's not going to last. In this case, you can see where it's way short. We're not covering the fasteners here with our second layer moisture barrier. Again, moisture is going to get into those fasteners. Obviously, you got to have a sleeve. They're not sleeving it, and you know we're going to have a problem with it eating away at these metallic pipes. Here is what Jason's talking about, and even more so, you can see where this OSB is not even completely covered. Okay, this needs to have a pedestal put on here. I have them come back, form up with some 2x4s, drill into an epoxy rebar, and we pour a concrete pedestal, and then we put this on top of it. Okay.
What do you think about just a little pre-made metal or plastic pedestals that those go on? Those are fine, right?
Yes, but most of these columns are too big for it.
Yeah.
That's the problem you have, is the columns are too big for it. If they're small columns, then yes, those standoffs are fine. It's gonna work.
Got a bigger
down
column
here,
you have to form that up and pour it.
Yes. Yeah. Now for you guys, I heard you say that you got some guys from Oklahoma. You could not do those standoff, those metal brackets on a smaller column because it's going to ice dam. That moisture is going to get underneath there and just tear that stucco up. So their only way to do it is with a pedestal. Okay. There's no other way that you're going to get that to do it. Now there is a way that Dean submitted, and I don't have it in here, and I like this idea. I would not, at this point, I would not do this, but to come back and retrofit something. And what he did is he created a piece of flashing. If you can see my mouse, it comes down, it comes over 1 inch, and then it has a half-inch, oops, I went too far. It has a half-inch reglet. And so what you're doing is you're making a saw cut all the way around this, and you're using a urethane and filling it up, and then you're putting that in there. Your weep screed is actually a funny shape, and it's reglet in there and sealed to the concrete. Okay. And that would be my second way to do it. And when he drew that, I love that idea, you know, because we've got a litigation case, and there's never any winners except me and the attorneys. You know, the experts and the attorneys are always winners no matter who wins. So ideally, we're not going to tear this whole thing apart. We got to figure out a way to stop the water, and he came up with that, and I love that deal. We're using it on a job site right now. Again, we're having issues here. We're not covering this up. You can see this is not going to work. You can see our exposed fasteners. We did not put in a bond break here. Furthermore, you have to cut this. Before we put our control joint or expansion joint on, you have to cut the lath behind here. This is not cut. They're just nailing it over the top, and it will not work right. It does not control the expansion and contraction.
Ruins the whole point.
Yep. And then again, we're just going to butter those vinyl windows up. We're just going to fill them up with concrete.
Every time. Every time.
Again, you can see, here's your OSB. We punched this out. This is the builder that doesn't want to spend $200 to $300. So we punch this out. You'll never stop the water. I got a stucco guy in the Austin market that he not only, it's on a house, I really liked what this guy did. He not only flashed everything with his Tyvek, then he cut his lath back away from here a little bit. And then he took and sealed every one of these penetrations to his paper. They are they're flashed and sealed. And I thought, man, I really like this guy. He had a few screw ups that he had to fix, missing the weed screed at the roof line. But overall, he was very conscientious and somebody you could work with and train for the last few aspects that needed to get done. But this is the way it is all the time. This is all over San Antonio. This is a situation where the builder said, yeah, you're right. We're no longer doing it this way, blah, 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 take it easy on us. And I told the attorney, he's lying. I'll be back. And I drove over to one of his other neighborhoods, and all these pictures, as he's telling us he no longer does it this way. These are the pictures on the same day, just 30 minutes after he told us they're no longer doing it that way. Again, how in the world is this going to ever work? It's on top of the Tyvek. It's a casing bead. All the Tyvek short. Here's your toe plate line. They just hung this off of here with staples. This is still very much standard and is going to do nothing but leak and cause damage. Again, no expansion joints. You can see this is all done wrong. In this case, they actually put the weep screed on this one. I remember this one. You can see the edge. It's on top of both layers of moisture barrier over here. It's only on under one layer here. This weep screed has to go on underneath both layers of moisture barrier. Again, no expansion joints, no bond breaks.
Required at all windows, or if you had like 3 in a row, could you just do the outside edge?
Yeah, you typically are going to bank them. Yeah, you're gonna use a bank of windows. Yeah. Because you're going to have a problem with the 2.5
case greater than 25 feet, right? 25 feet is the hard cap. You can't go further.
No. That is for masonry veneer. Yes, sir. Yeah, no, this is going to be generally around that 12 to 14 foot range.
That's right.
So again, we don't have any bond break up here. I don't sweat this that much, to be honest with you. I'm more concerned that there's no head flashings here, there's no expansion joints, and there's no bond breaks. This is just going to leak.
Yeah, it's crucial.
So this is the same window, right? Okay, so I want you to look at this. Water's going to get in and travel down here, okay? It's going to run down here, and we've tucked our sill flashings in between our 2 layers of moisture barrier. Our weave screed is on only under 1 layer of moisture barrier. And this is a different one, but similar. Our moisture barrier stops at the toe plate. So what we're doing is literally forcing the water in under our toe plate all the time. It takes time, but it forces it directly underneath the toe plate because every bit of this is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So here is showing you how this is wrong. So, as I do these inspections, I get a lot of calls to do them. This is your cheap green house wrap, okay? It is on behind the weep screed. So again, where are we forcing the water? We're forcing the water up underneath this toe plate. We're just forcing the water here. There's no real overhang. You can see all these fasteners have missed. They shot it with a staple gun too low. So this weep screed is not overhanging, but a 1/2 inch past the foundation, and moisture is going to get in it. This is a new house. Moisture is going to get in. Hey, there's my ugly face. Didn't notice that. Moisture is going to get in underneath there. This is just not going to work right. It's not layered right. And eventually, and you're going to see what's going to happen as these houses get just a few years on them. I use the holes for this. You can't see it here, but this is actually the moisture barrier is done wrong. Here's what's really important about this. These holes would generally have stalactites in them. Okay. These holes are in here for air and stuff. This is a drip edge. This is where your water comes out. So whenever they use Elastomeric or a polymer top coat, you cannot seal this. I make them come back all the time with a razor knife and slit it. Okay, because they've sealed it and they're trapping water in there. This is where the water drips off. That 45-degree angle on that weave screed creates a drip edge, just like it does for your roof. This is another major one. No expansion joints, no bond breaks. No flashing. So this is not only in violation of the section under the ASTM standards for stucco, but it also, we have a wood projection. So under 703.4, we have a wood projection with no head flashing. They do it all the time. I just did one the other day that was already sagging, 20-year-old house, but sagging. Now here we have the wrong deco bands. The deco bands have to be sloped. I had an architect that's a quote an expert on a court case. He's on the other side. He said it was irrelevant that these were not sloped because the slope was only to keep the birds from landing on them.
Yeah.
No, he put that in writing. He put that in writing. The ASTM deals with that. It's got to be sloped to shed water. But here's the problem is even if we had flashings up here and we do this type of decorative band, we blew all the holes through here, putting this on here. We blew holes through all our flashing. That's why these are horrible. You want the adhered polystyrene with the behind the moisture barrier like we showed from the ASTM standards. This is just putting holes in all of our flashing details if they were there.
Yeah.
Again, so here's your stalactite. This is helping to lock it on. This is our drainage plane right here. Okay. This is where the water is going to weep from. That's why it's called a weep. It's designed to weep from there. Okay. You'll find weep screeds that don't have holes. They don't have to have holes. Okay. You'll find a lot of them without that sometimes. This is how it works. This is how our system drains. Okay.
So again, and I always thought all those holes were where the water comes out. And when actually the water comes out is the gap between the stucco and the metal.
Right.
Yep.
It's going to drip off here. This is a $1 million house, 3 years old. I knew it was rotted out. It was on the verge of collapse. You can see the stains. You'll see clear stains. These are clear stains. We're not rotted yet. Probably won't have any real water damage. There was 2 sections here and here. Okay, this is the same view, just slightly off a little bit. You can see this is all water. Okay, you know this is rotted. Other experts go, oh, well, he doesn't know. He's got to cut it open. I will stake my life on it. If it's brown, it's rotted. I'm that confident. If it's brown, it's rotted. So here we go.
I got lots of brown in my house. Shh.
I hope you don't.
I do.
Here it is, 3-year-old house, $1 million house outside of San Antonio up by Bernie. Here's they come start cutting it open. You can see the amount of rot starting. Now we start tearing this open. It's completely rotted going into the studs. We are about to lose this front section of this house on a 3-year-old house.
Wow. Bernie is still on the 2006 energy code. That'll be a shame.
Yeah. But all the builders said that they're really tough up there.
Really?
Yeah, that's what they always say. I always laugh. I go, why don't you find out which code revision they're on? This is just completely gone. These people ended up going with another expert after I started because I couldn't drop what I was doing. And they called me Sunday night at 8 o'clock and wanted me there to meet the builder the next morning at 9. I said, I cannot, absolutely cannot. I stay busy a week to 2 at a time. I'll be glad to meet him out there, but I cannot do it. And so they went with someone else. The builders convinced them only to fix this front part. And I go, okay, save my information. Here it is, tearing it open. Okay. Again, more pictures. This is so rotted up in here that we're going to lose the structural integrity of this section of the roof. This is all load bearing here on this really high wall. Again, none of it was done right. Another house, brown stains. This is up in the Bulverde area. Same builder, house after house after house. I'm now, as of tomorrow, I'll be on my 3rd house in a row. Litigation on this builder. Here is your lack of soffit detail. Look at all the water coming out of here. This was a commercial building that was 8 years old. It was only 6,000 square feet right out over there by Sonterra, expensive area here in San Antonio. My client was buying. I've done a lot of work for this client, and I told him it would be $650,000 to fix the stucco. It was only 8 years old, only 6,000 square feet. I said it could go higher because I can't get to any of the walls on this one side. The other space is 2 spaces, total of 6,000. I couldn't see anything on the one exterior wall over there. It came in at $850,000. The building was about to be completely gone. They had to just redo the entire building. $850,000 on a 6,000 square foot building, 8 years old. This here, you can see your water issues. You can see where this is leaking at a window, obviously. So we're having these water issues here, leaking out. And you can see this is just a nightmare. You can see all the staining here. When it stains like that, about guarantee you that that is all rotted and decay back in there. Again, we have a wood projection, so we're in violation of the section for stucco, but we're just plain and simple under in violation under the IRC under the under 703.4. Again, here's your clear stains. Probably not water damage yet, but it won't take very long. Again, this house is only a few years old. We're leaking out behind here. Eventually, you're going to have problems. You can also see the water staining coming out of this crack here. Okay, you can see there's cracks and there's water staining coming out. It won't, you know, this picture's a year old by now. It's probably rotted. Here is your lovely balcony. Here's your water stain coming out. Okay. Here's your stucco, no flashing. They just bolted this balcony up to this. Inside, they've caulked it real nice for my client and everything, where the door frame's rotted. You can see the water stains where that deck is connected. You can start to see the water damage along here.
I'm telling you, it looks like you took these pictures from my house.
Look at this one. This is big enough to stick your hand in. This is because they took the stucco below grade. There's no bond break at the edge of the foundation. It's just split it apart. You can see they've been fixing this. All kinds of damage here. And again, the water tracks up underneath there. We have to have a way to thermally expand and contract at the line. Everything out there in the Dominion, all these rich neighborhoods, their HOA for the longest time required it. That's going to be my next big case. Go after the HOA because they were demanding the builders do it this way. So even if the builder was smart enough and wanted to do it right, he was prevented from doing it right.
Well, our HOA tells you to take it down to grade. Our HOA doesn't realize that there needs to be.
And they will not, let you repair it right either. So I've got a few attorneys we're waiting. We're going to, most of these HOAs have about $5 million. We're going to put it back on the HOA because they're forcing the builders and they're forcing the contractors to specifically do it wrong. You can't do it any other way, or the HOA in some of these expensive neighborhoods threaten to sue you. This one here, the realtor is mad, never used me again. This here is 15 years old. They call me out for this, and the realtor's mad because I tell them all the stucco's bad. This is over the top of masonite. This is in San Antonio, west side of San Antonio. It's got more problems even that. You can see where water just going underneath there, no thresholds. I mean, you name it. This has been redone numerous times. It looks like they probably had a trim board down here because the masonite rotted. They stuccoed over the top of all of it.
That's one way to do it.
This is the outside. Here is your masonite where they just stopped. You can see how badly damaged this is. I told them I couldn't inspect it.
No, you just stay away from that.
Look at this. Here's your wood in here. This is what they did. The water's just all running into this.
15 years old?
I did this. No. This house is old, but this house is from the 80s, but then they did this. I did this 15 years ago. This was already 10 years old. So this is 25-year-old stucco at that time, but it didn't make it from day one because it was just never done right. No. This here was a huge deal. This was a very politically connected gentleman. This is out in Alpine, Texas, north of there, where it doesn't rain. But this particular year got 48 inches of rain. I zoomed in. This is actually from about 100 yards away. It's at his gate. He called me out there to look at this. This story, a little bit more of my experience. I was a arbitrator here in court cases against home builders in Texas, and one of the few people without a law degree that presided over arbitration cases in Texas. And so he called me out there. He lost in arbitration, lost $84,000. And when I got to the gate, he wanted to know if there's anything he could do. And I said, sir, I don't condone breaking the law. I said, but the only thing that's going to save this house is gasoline and a match. And he said, you can tell this from the gate? I said, yes, sir, I can. And you're going to see what's happening here. These are all the cracks they've been repairing. This is bulging out. The water's gotten in at this balcony. But two things happened. Water's gotten in, but this was done with very light foreign chicken wire, imported chicken wire, and it can't hold it. These beams that they do are great. They look great, but you can't stop them. You can't stop the water from here. If it's square, we could box it out with our casing beads, embedded caulk joints. I guess when there's a will, there's a way, but this is just very difficult. They look cool, but the water wicks back into the wall with these beams. Stucco down below grade. Okay, all the way down. Some of these slides keep shifting around every time I do this. Sorry about that. This picture is a little blurry. This is back in the old days where we used to use one of those Sony Mavica cameras that you put a 3.5-inch floppy in. This is water damage here. This doesn't know justice. When we go to the other side, I'm going to show you how it does it justice. Okay, this is a door down here. Okay, the kitchen door led right out the back. There's your chicken wire, cannot hold, it's just cracked everywhere. Okay, here, your decorative band, they put all the holes in it, no flashing, water leaks in. This is another door. Water just leaking in. You can't stop this. We peeled the decorative band off. There's no way you can stop any water with this. It's impossible. I'm surprised this is not all screwed up here. This, again, is not the greatest. This is your door trim, the doors down below here. This is what's left of your door header. It's just gone. This is the back side. So the outside didn't look as bad as it did on the inside. The mold was so bad in this house, it was unsafe to live in. This, again, was only just a few years old. And the guy lost in arbitration. It wasn't the builder's fault, surprisingly. But the whole header is just completely gone. You can see there is nothing left of the header. There is over here, but there's nothing left of the header. The door is what was holding these studs up from the upstairs getting to the point of collapsing. Again, more moisture, okay? This is another house I got going right now. Currently, it's about $200,000 to repair it. It's just completely rotted out, 8-year-old house. You can see here, the builder says, okay, we'll tear it open, but if everything's fine, your client has to agree $5,000 to $8,000 per opening to put it back. And so the attorney did a lot of work with it. He said, are you sure, Jeff? I said, oh, I'm positive. When they tore it open, this was the only indication, no water stains, no nothing inside, because the lady could hear it drip and she'd jump up out of bed and stay up all night with mops, sponges, and everything. And so there was absolutely no water stains whatsoever, no water damage inside whatsoever. When they cut it open, she just started bawling. And she said, did you really know it was that bad? I said, sure I did. I would not have had you risk between $10,000 to $16,000 for 2 cuts into this house if not. Here is the pedestal. Okay, so we're getting this where we're creating a pedestal. So although we're not 2 inches off of here, you can see we are off the ground a little bit. Okay, not much, but it's up just a little bit. This is another one, another builder that got into a lot of legal trouble, and they called me. He's getting ready to do a remodel on this house. The home inspector missed it all. This is leaking into the closet from the stucco. It's coming out right here. You can see the water stains. When the people moved in, there was a bucket of damp red that they left in the closet for them. This is another house. You can see the water stains that are flushing this out. They've recently redone all of this. Okay, this was all rusted. It's actually one of my employees that was buying this house down at the coast, and he's gonna have to redo it. But this is all freshly done. You can see the water stains. And here's what it looks like when you look up underneath there. It's just all completely rotted out on there. And being down at the coast, obviously this is not going to work. This should have been stainless steel. You can't put this on there and expect it to last. And here is another reason why this doesn't work. They're going to lift this and try to put this window in here. How do you flash that? There's no sill flashing, no nothing. How do you do anything with this?
You start over on that wall.
But they don't. They're just going to stick it in there and caulk it. The same builder as in some of the other photos. And that's the builder that has 300 to 400 lawsuits coming their way. Again, now this is a different deal. We've got zip, no flashing. They just filled it with some expanding foam, and that should work, you know, other than the raw wood here and stuff.
If
sure
you're seeing this on inspections, for the love of, I mean, please make them correct. This is a catastrophe waiting to happen. I was lucky. We had one stucco crew in Granbury, and they were actually pretty good. You didn't see this at all, ever.
It gets worse this time of year too, Jason, because the builders don't care whether you buy it or not. People are back to the stupidity, you know, bidding $100,000 more than what a house is worth, and then they're financing that stupidity and spending $300,000 more than a house is worth, not including the repairs and maintenance that it's going to take. So they're literally, by the time it's said and done, $500,000 upside down on their stupidity. That's what killed us in the 08-09 time frame, and it's going to happen again. And we have to be careful. But the other thing is, this is just flat destroying people's lives. This is not like a piece of James Hardy siding I had one yesterday that did this kind of crap, and I said, okay, this isn't going to break the bank. We need to replace 3-4 pieces of hardy siding. You know, no big deal. This is catastrophic to fix these houses. You have to chip it away. It is so difficult to make it, and that's why it's costing hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix these homes. It's very, very expensive to fix these homes. Again, you know, we're using our flashing here. We're just kind of stopping it. I don't know how they're going to finish this off. My guess is they're just going to take the stucco right down to the roof here. I don't know what the hell they're going to, I don't know what they're going to do here. This is, again, it's just not going to work. We don't have a weave screed. We don't have any bond breaks. The moisture is going to track up into here. This is another big issue you see. This fascia has to be cut short, and we have to run the moisture barrier behind here. They never do it, and this is a place that always rots out all the time. You have to cut this fascia short and run this moisture barrier back behind here to stop that from happening as a one-piece moisture barrier detail.
At least they got some kick-out flashing. Hey, they did something right.
Yeah, they did. Again, we're not overhanging. None of this is flash. You're not going to stop this water here, you know, whatsoever. But they also put the staples in here really low. It's water's just going to leak in around this. No care regard to anything. This is what it starts looking like when you open these houses up. So the one with all the brown staining I showed you where the lady started crying, they almost dropped this house. It was already all rotted out, but then they went in and just started cutting the studs, and they never put the wall up inside to support it. She started screaming. The upstairs almost collapsed with them inside. The guys just started cutting the studs out with no support inside.
Nice.
You can see this is, you know, what it starts looking like, and then you tear it apart and it was all rotted back in behind there. The same builder, they threw these windows in. This is how they flashed it. Then they just stuccoed over it because the stucco wasn't ready. These were put in like this with no moisture barrier.
Nice.
They came back and put the moisture barrier on over this afterwards because builder's first source.
There's a jurisdiction in Texas still to this day not requiring a weather resistant barrier.
Yes, yeah. Builder's first source did this because the builder wasn't ready and they wanted to install the windows. So they just put a little bit of stuff around here. This was what they did. Now, this theoretically could have worked if they would have lifted all the stuff back up and then tucked it in there and didn't shingle. But you know, why? Why? Just coordinate things right. Again, more pictures, more all the same house, you know, just completely failed. This is what it looks like from a distance when you start tearing it apart. This header's just completely rotted out. This is where it started to drop. Really, really bad. So we didn't just have a stucco problem. We also, again, because they weren't ready, they put all this on first, and then they put it on top. And so we were forcing water from here behind here as well. No flashings, everything. So we had leaks here. We had leaks here. We had leaks here. Everything leaked. More of the same house, same details. I've got quite a few of those. Once you tore this open, you saw what it looked like with the spray foam. I should probably change how these are, because once you tore it open, you saw how rotted the studs were in there. This is not just rot. You know, they tried to claim this was just a little bit of rot on the surface here. Absolutely was not. This is a case in actually where I'm defending the builder. This is the only evidence. I don't know if y'all can tell what's wrong here. So what they end up doing, this is the only window I found because I went back and did some more destructive testing. The expert on the other side found that they put it's flashed. Here's your head flashings. I've worked with this builder and he's been making lots of changes through the years. I actually like them. They ran out of lick and stick and they used some DuPont tape to the waxy coating on the gyp board here. And so this is wrong. It's not leaking or anything, but it's wrong, and so it's going to have to be torn out. And the builder's agreeing to do it. The other side, I don't think, is being reasonable on what they're expecting. And that is it.
Awesome.
I don't know where we set time-wise. We didn't do half bad, so now we got some times for any questions anybody has.
For Q&A. I've only got one that we haven't answered yet. I think this happened a little earlier. It says, shows the sheathing flush to the foundation. In Houston, the 2-inch is flush with foundation and bottom of sheathing is exposed. I'm not 100% sure of that question. What issues might occur?
Well, there's a couple of things. So one of the issues when you start looking with at zip and stuff like that, or LP, is that backside of that cannot be touching the concrete. So it depends on what kind of sheathing it is. If we're just talking about OSB, it does not have to overhang. As a matter of fact, I don't know that I would want my OSB to overhang. It's going to be hard to judge where to nail in from my weep screed and other stuff. My weep screed, when installed properly, is going to give me that 1.5 to 2 inch overhang. Okay, so we're going to get that overhang that we need. And so that's really where it's at. The sheathing, if we overhang it, it's going to be hard to nail it into there like we should. And I would not recommend to overhang that sheathing theoretically. The zip board, I think, really should overhang a little bit. It's something that I've talked with Mark about. It's designed that way. Their product is designed to have the butyl rubber flashing details that they have. I like their flashing details, but we're dependent on trying to get these guys to do this right. And it's critical to really drive it home in the install manual that they get that weave screed flashed properly. And believe it or not, sometimes they'll nail that weave screed on and no flashing. If you go along and lift just a little bit on your lath paper, you'll find that there is no peel and stick flashing to that weave screed with zip board. Doesn't happen very often, but I do find it on occasion. And that's 100% just going to track moisture up underneath the toe plate, resulting in all kinds of damage in these houses. Like that one house that I showed you that was leaking into the closet there. It's
not just peel and stick flashing. It is remove the dust from the substrate, peel, stick, and then back roll to make sure it adheres.
Yep.
I mean, it's how many framers have the roller on their truck?
Do you know you buy all this stuff from MG? I used to buy from MG when I built, and they don't even sell J rollers. So what I would have them do, it's not the same, but it still works. Go to Napa or AutoZone and get a little 3-4 inch rubber Bondo squeegee and use that. It works.
Yeah.
You could not even buy the J rollers in this town for the longest time, believe it or not, Jason.
Yeah, no,
they didn't sell them.
It's crazy. It's just
some places still don't, but a Bondo squeegee is going to work for you too. Okay,
yeah,
so we can do that. The main thing is to create that friction and activate that. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize is those flashings can't be applied when it's less than 40 degrees, unless you're going to use a heat gun. How many times you gone out to a job site in freezing temperature and seen the guy with a heat gun?
I can't tell you how many framing inspections I've been on where I've taken the time to just vigorously rub my hand back and forth over the flashing because it was just kind of touched on and you could just tell it wasn't adhered properly. It's very, as inspectors, if you're seeing peeling away from the peel and stick flashing, red tag that job and make them come back and adhere it properly.
Yeah, that's a big one because it is catastrophic. This is not like we can put our wife and kids out on the highway picking up beer cans to pay for it. The cost of these repairs is literally catastrophic that's occurring. The cheapest stucco repair that I've done, and that was only one wall in New Braunfels, that was years ago, was 14 grand. They didn't do rest of the house, and they should have. Then I had another one for 30. Outside of that, I've had them, as you heard, up to 850,000. I had one over in the Houston area that was 250,000. I've got one over on the golf course of Sonterra that was 20-year-old house. I told them it would be 360,000. It came in at 361,000. We literally had to remove part of the second story. It's gone, had to be rebuilt. It was just, there was no saving it. The roof, walls, everything just completely gone. And then rebuild that big game room back above the garage. And I need to put those pictures in here. I mean, that's, literally a 20-year-old house. Now, in this guy's defense, it was a $1.3 million house. He got him down to $500,000. He knew what he was getting into. He hired me for the stucco. So he's fine on that. But that is a Cinderella story. That is not usually what happens. And these realtors that are selling these houses, I had one yesterday, all been out of shape. She goes, "Oh, I know who you are. You're the one that beat up that stucco house that's 2 years old." Well, what she failed to tell you is, to finish the conversation, is that 2-year-old house was already leaking. It's already leaking water. You get water in these houses, and the way they're airtight, low-E windows, we're not getting ultraviolet light in there. they are rotting out twice as fast as what they used to. These old houses that were just a plaster interior walls, no insulation, they got wet, dry, and they're 100 years old. That doesn't happen when we put insulation and we make them airtight to meet the energy code. These houses are rotting out in just a matter of just a few years.
Yeah, no, it makes a huge, huge difference. Hey, if we didn't learn anything else from the webinar today, I think your idea about a little extra money, put your wife and kids out there on the highway picking up beer cans. I never really thought about that before. Pretty good.
That's my analogy. Yeah, if it's cheap enough, we can go as a family and go clean up the highway and go to the can cow or can crush or whatever. And and that's what's nice about that. I've got a few jobs I do down in the Corpus area, and more of them are getting into the James Hardy. And I had a client that 3-year-old house, stucco leaked, and the listing agent goes, "They all leak down here." I go, "Yeah, but they're not supposed to. They can't maintain this leakage." And so I got them to buy a house that, instead of having the stucco, had the James Hardy. I said, "Look, if something flies and breaks a couple pieces of James Hardy, we just tear this off. We lay some new ones on some sawhorses. We paint them. We slide them up in there, nail them, caulk them, touch up the paint. We're done." We cannot do that with stucco. It is critical that stucco gets done right the first time, because it is not something that we can just remove a few pieces. Even brick, if we have to, we can take a grinder, cut a few pieces of brick out. We're not going to cut into that moisture barrier. What it takes to repair these houses is taking a grinder, making a real shallow score cut, chipping that out very, very carefully. And I say 12 inches. Dean, I think he spec'd it at 18. And that 12 is minimum. The higher you go, the better. And then you have to gently chip out all that concrete, lift the lath. Don't tear up the moisture barrier. If you tear it up, we got to chip it out even further. So you have to be very slow and very patient. It takes days of a guy sitting on a bucket, moving along, chipping that out. It is so time consuming. If we end up with a 10 by 10 wall, I tell them just tear the whole wall out. They go, "What?" I said, "Just tear the whole wall out. You're going to spend more in labor than what it's going to take to just remove, just make a few cuts, rip it off in big chunks, new moisture barrier, and let's just replace this 10 by 10 wall. Let's not mess with it."
Yeah, be done in 3 days instead of 3 days.
Right. Just to chip it out. Right. And most of the time when they chip it out, they tear up all my moisture barrier, and I have to go back, re-inspect it, and make them re-chip it out again and say, "Slow down, because you're tearing up the moisture barrier. We have to have at least 2 inches of overhang of our moisture barrier here to work. I can't have you doing this. I can't just overhang my moisture barrier a 1/4 of an inch and expect it to work."
Yeah. Wow. And that was fantastic. And I like that Joseph chimed in that, as inspectors, and I feel for you, especially, you get a job as an inspector on a jurisdiction where the builders have been doing the same thing the same way for forever. Everything's been doing the same way for forever. And maybe you've attended a couple of our webinars, or maybe you've caught a class here or there, or maybe you just came from another jurisdiction where they knew more and had better builders and forced it to be done right. Well, you take a job in a jurisdiction and your mortgage is reliant on your paycheck being consistent. Well, you don't, there's a fine line between, I know this is wrong. But ultimately, the people in your jurisdiction in which you inspect, they're reliant on having a decent house for years to come, and they're paying good money for it. And a lot of these things that we talked about this morning, they don't cost a whole lot more money, or oftentimes they don't cost any more money. It's just, did we shingle it backwards? Did we have a bead of sealant? Did we do, head flashing on a window is not that expensive. I laughed at a bunch of those stains I see at my house. It's true, but kind of like Jeff mentioned, we got into it right. And so I knew there were going to be problems. And one of the first things I did was come and cut into the stucco above all my windows and slid flashing back behind the WRB and sealed it all up, because you could just see where water had been leaking in over and over again. But it's, catching this stuff as it's being built is the one and only way to do it. After the fact, they're calling Jeff, and Jeff's coming out there and just eyeballing it from the road and telling them, "Oh yeah, it's gonna be about 160. And they're looking at him like he's got 3 eyeballs, but he's been doing it long enough to know. And it's just a few simple little things, a few details that we could get right that'll make a tremendous amount of difference. Fantastic job, Jeff. I can't thank you enough. We'll let everybody get finished. We've answered all the questions, so we'll let y'all get back to work 15 minutes early or so. Jeff, any parting words?
No, that's it. If anybody ever has any questions, my information's up here. Give me a call, and I'll be glad to answer anything that I possibly can, and kind of go from there. And hopefully everybody learned a little bit something out of this and what have you, and so that they can do a little bit better of a job, because the people are really dependent on you, and it is catastrophic. It's not something that the average person can assume the cost of, and quite often you see a lot of these houses where they're just walking away from them. They're just they're having to let them get foreclosed on because they cannot afford to fix them and keep going the way they're going.
Yeah, it's a shame, and you see it time and time again, and too many times it's that young couple, little kids, kind of did everything right and everything going. And yeah, I did have a question about CUs. Just as always, just fill out the course evaluation from Liz and you'll get your ICC CUs. But so oftentimes it's the least fortunate, or not necessarily least fortunate, but it's, like I said, it's that new young couple that just got a couple of jobs. They're still paying college loans, et cetera, and they've got a $40,000 repair. I mean, you can't afford that. Not only that, good luck going to the bank and getting a loan for that. I mean, and what kind of rate? And so don't underestimate the importance of the job y'all do as inspectors, because it can really make a difference in someone's life if you are just calling out these details, these small little details. And just think, how's water going to run, shingling fashion, rot. Think about, just think about moisture movement. It's really that simple. And you don't have to know the ASTM standards and 100% of the code references. You know how water moves, and an improperly shingled or improperly flashed house feature is going to invite water back behind that wall. So calling that out, and heck, you can be your builder's friend that way too. I mean, a superintendent that gets all upset, or a builder that gets all upset because you point out a flashing water intrusion detail, that builder, you don't need him building in your jurisdiction anyway. I mean, that builder should thank you, because what's the number one cause of litigation for home builders, Jeff? Would it be water intrusion?
That rate's way up there. There's no doubt about it. That would be one of the top ones, and it doesn't matter what type of siding material it is. I mean, if you screw it up that badly and you got water in there, that typically is a big one. And when you look at the code, like I tell people, 2/3 of all the code, maybe even probably closer to 3/4, is all about water. When you think you got to have good, clean water coming in to drink, you got to have the nasty used water going out. Windows is about water. Doors is about water. Even parts of your electrical, whether it's some of the grounding and bonding that occurs, as well as GFCIs, is about water. Roof is about water. Siding's about water. Your foundation, having to maintain proper drainage away from the foundation, water. So just about everything in the code is tied back to the water, with the exception of probably your lighting and so forth. But everything is about water, and that's because it's the most destructive thing that we have.
Well, it really is. It really is. Well, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Thanks again so much, Jeff. And we'll go ahead and cut it. Y'all have a great day. Thanks, everybody. Bye.